Peloton is ready when you are. Bring home the Peloton Bike Plus for the holidays and work out your way. Unleash everything. It's your workout, your rules. As long as you show up, Peloton's instructors will help you show off and keep you coming back for more. For Peloton's December offer, head to onepeloton.com/deals. All access memberships ever. Terms apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to the end of the year episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Sorry about that. I literally had to fly in from outer space.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, there's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's generally to talk of the stories of films. And I talk about production stories, development stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. But with all that preamble, I'm doing something slightly different for this episode of Film Stories, because Film Stories isn't just a podcast, it's a print magazine, it's a website, and all sorts of other mischief as well. And there's a team of people who work on it. And so, for the end of the year episode of Film Stories, I've got that team of people together to stop fighting with each other, to talk about the movies and the movies of this year, really, that we really cared for, and to highlight some of the ones that we've missed out on. So it's as simple as that. I'm going to jump straight into that conversation, which I cunningly set up just the other side of this little clip from a 2023 film.
Our flight has gone down. This is an emergency.
Survive together or die alone.
We're getting off this island.
Hello, and a very warm and slightly unfortunate welcome to the end of year Film Stories podcast. Now, there is someone who works in and around the world of film stories called Emma, who decided it would be a great idea that instead of just having me go on the final episode of the year on the podcast, I invite all the other people who've worked on film stories. So first of all, I've got Maria. Maria is our film and TV editor. Say hello, Maria.
Hello.
Excellent. There is John, who does all sorts of things, but at the moment he's trying to stop a dog getting through the door behind him.
Hello.
There's Lauren. Lauren's our contributing editor, and Lauren is already laughing, which suggests she's going to be bringing more of her mucky films to this particular podcast.
Hello.
James is hiding professionally behind a microphone and obviously has all the highbrow things for us to talk about.
Hello, Simon.
And then covered in sawdust is the Film Stories online editor, Mr. Ryan Lambie. Have you still got sawdust on you?
Loads of sawdust. Hello.
So because we don't want this to go on for 54 hours, all we've each been allowed to do is come up with 3 films that we want to talk about that we've really liked this year. I have to get out of the way straight away that James Harvey has tried to break the rules just so he can go on about The Pope's Exorcist. So would you like 10 seconds on The Pope's Exorcist? Because clearly nothing else can match that.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, The Pope's Exorcist is a film where Russell Crowe plays an exorcist and his boss is the Pope. It's more like Indiana Jones than The Exorcist, and it's the film of the year. Thank you.
It's the film of the year. It's better than Indiana Jones.
It is the best Indiana Jones film this year, and it is called The Pope's Exorcist.
So anyone who's been dialing into this looking for deep insight that they otherwise wouldn't get will no doubt be bowled over when you said that he is an exorcist for the Pope.
He is an exorcist for the Pope. That's what he says. And he makes little chirping sounds at nuns. Like a bird. He pretends to be a bird, makes little chirping noises at the nuns, and the nuns all laugh and run away.
There were nuns in one of your choices this year, James. I think Wonka has a flying nun in it. Isn't Wonka on your list?
Wonka is on my list, Simon. Probably the newest film that we're going to talk about, I imagine, because it came out yesterday. It is directed by Paul King, who you may know from Paddington and Paddington 2. And also, very importantly, it's written by Simon Farnaby, who's having a very lovely time at the moment. He co-wrote Paddington 2, and he also wrote Phantom of the Open, which was a very nice Mark Rylance golf comedy from last year. And it's lovely. And it's very nice.
So have any of anyone else watched Wonka? Are we going to allow James's choice through?
Yes, I've seen it.
So, Ryan, when you saw Wonka, you decided it was Scarface.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's about a person coming from overseas to a strange, very colourful land and selling a very addictive product and smashing the local cartel, which is in league with the police. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of Scarface, but with a bit more singing and dancing.
Just a bit.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I rewatched Scarface last night, actually, and you know, it's got lots of 80s montages, which could be like its equivalent of song and dance scenes. Because they've been talking about, you know, making another Scarface for years. I think they should actually just remake it as a musical.
Do you think Simon Farnaby should write it and Paul King direct?
Why not? What's the worst that could happen?
So I think we're letting Wonka through. I think you're allowed that. Maria, go on, hit us with one of your three choices.
I'm going to go with Sisu, which is a Finnish film about one man going against a literal army of Nazis. And, I mean, do I say more? Do I need to say more?
Has it got nuns in it?
I don't recall any nuns, but someone does get hit face with a landmine in like the first 10 minutes. So it's a winner in my eyes.
And is this just because you're Finnish that you're going for that? Is that a bit of like patriotism in there?
No, I don't think so. I think it does appeal to. I mean, Sisu is a quality that I would hope that all Finnish people have inherently. And I think the film makes a really good case for it and shows what it means to have it. And the film declares it as this white-knuckled form of courage and unimaginable determination when all hope is lost. But it's a very fun film. It's gory. Yeah, it's very gory, very violent, and very entertaining. I'm not saying that it's a perfect film. I did give it 5 stars when I reviewed it.
I'm not saying it's a perfect film, but I'm giving it 5 stars.
What is? Yeah, no, it does what it sets out to do incredibly well. I had a blast. It's 90 minutes. It's pretty good. It's up there.
You had me at 90 minutes there. But I think most of us can agree that Fast X was not very good. But say that was a Finnish film, would that like add 20% for you? I'm just trying to work out what the level of bias is. No?
No,
okay.
I've always been weirdly ashamed of being from Finland. And it's only sort of this year that I've started to kind of embrace it. And I think Sisu was a huge part of that for me.
I look forward to an influx of positive reviews from Finnish listeners. I'd just like to point out I love people from Finland. If anyone's like thinking of downvoting the podcast based on Maria. Go on, Ryan, throw one in. Let's have one of yours.
Oh, God, which one do I go for?
Pick number 2 of your list.
Well, funnily enough, that's The Creator, which might seem like a bit of a left field choice given that it wasn't a massive hit and the reactions to it are a bit mixed. So this is Gareth Edwards' return to filmmaking almost 10 years after he made Rogue One.
The best of the more recent Star Wars films.
For my money, definitely.
Yes.
I think it's my favourite Star Wars film since Disney bought Lucasfilm. And I think it's telling that so much of the TV output actually looks like Rogue One. I think that's kind of a thing. It's a good thing for Gareth Edwards, given, you know, how he left that film and, you know, what that kind of did for his reputation for a while, given that it was sort of said that the film was taken away from him. Anyway, The Creator, it's a great sci-fi film, I thought. But it's a 5-star genre film, I say, as a sci-fi film. It's intelligent, it's exciting. It's stunning that it looks so good given the budget that it was made for. And also, I've not seen many people sort of engage with it in this way, but it's actually quite subversive. I won't give away the ending, but if you actually analyse what the ending is and how you could read it, it is actually quite subversive, especially given this year's conversation about AI and fears about AI and what it means for the future of humans. Fantastic film, I thought.
I don't think that's a very contentious choice, really. I think that one gets through fairly easily.
It had a very good trailer as well. With Aerosmith's Dream On I like that very much. I almost like that more than the film, I'm afraid, Ryan.
You know, Ryan just gave a lovely couple of minutes there, and you just had to come in and spoil it at the end. I saw what you did there.
Gareth Edwards, I find really interesting because he has, since Monsters, he definitely has a look to his films. That's been widely adopted and now turns up in virtually everything. I know he established the Godzilla look, which was then ruined quite a lot by the 2 follow-up movies, but the Apple TV series has gone back in and lent quite heavily.
That Monarch?
Yeah, on his style and the idea of lived-in worlds that look post-apocalyptic. I think he went a long way to establishing like the ideal look for that.
Yeah, that's what I love about the creator. Actually, is some of the ideas that he comes up with in this that are just brilliant. Like there's a robot that is kind of a bomb and a robot. It's like a massive barrel on legs, and it just runs into the middle of a battlefield and then explodes. It's so bizarre and it shouldn't work, but it does.
I think
he's just great at that sort of thing.
Building monsters with the signs and the general sort of the very lived-in aesthetic of it, I think, has become universally adopted now, and he should get more credit for that than he does.
Well, there's no one whose film views I tend to agree with more, apart from pretty much everyone else on planet Earth, than Lauren Miles. So come on then, Lauren. Let's have the first of your no doubt incredibly contentious 3 choices.
Well, all of my picks are actually films from first-time feature writer-directors.
Don't try and justify it. Here we go.
I'll start with the recent one, which is Femme.
That was great. How disappointing.
Sung Joon Ping and Sam H. Freeman. It is great. Yeah,
it is actually great. Yes,
you're agreeing with me.
Yes, I just need to take another tablet.
So yes, Joon Ping and Sam H. Freeman have written and directed this together, and they did a short of the same name in 2021. But this kind of expands on the idea and takes a different turn as well. Starts with a really good drag show, which is always a plus. And
okay, are we adding that to our list of things that we want from films? So huge explosion in the first 10 minutes, some nuns, and now a good drag show. Okay, we are putting together the ingredients for the next Fast and Furious film as we go. Anyway, carry on.
Come on, get Vin Diesel on the phone.
God.
But yeah, after that, it takes a bit of a dark turn with the main character Jules, played by Nathan Stewart Jarrett, gets attacked by a gang of kind of ultra masculine, homophobic guys led by George Mackay, and then he sees him again in a gay sauna and sees a chance to get revenge. And the thing I like about the story and where it goes is it could so easily be clear-cut victim, villain, but it doesn't go down that road at all, in that both characters kind of have sympathetic elements, and they also have, bad aspects to their characters. Even Jules, the main character, goes down a bit of a dark road in trying to get his revenge. So yeah, it's just a really good, twisted, kind of neo-noir thriller, and yeah, just an excellent first-time feature.
Well, you loved the short film as well, didn't you? You were a huge fan of that, I remember.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was really good. And it was really good to catch up with the directors again down the road.
I'm still not quite over nasty George Mackay. George Mackay is supposed to be lovely and everything, and now he's not. And that kind of changes everything. Right. With a heavy heart, I turn to John Moore, who's still keeping the dog under control. And we've already rejected Strays as a possible candidate. Go on, John.
I'm going to challenge James on the latest film of the year to make it.
I thought you were going to challenge him on The Pope's Exorcist, because that would have been a fight I'm ready to hit.
I'm always there for Russell Crowe and an interesting accent. But I'm
tell him to his face.
I'm going to talk about What Happens Later, a Meg Ryan directed film, which is essentially a two-hander between her and David Duchovny that happens in a dreamlike airport terminal, and has been part of a weird thing that I've had this year about I suddenly enjoy films where two people just spend the majority of it talking to each other. What Happens Later is very much for the Gen X generation, which I generally am. I very much felt like I had been targeted by this film, where they take two people that were instrumental in my youth and the movies and media that I liked, put them together and made a bittersweet, unromantic sort of comedy. As I said to Simon, I'd very much been exotic marigold hoteled by this film. I felt extremely old. It was almost unfair when they started talking about, I don't know, seeing the Pixies in the early 90s. I won't spoil it too much. It is really, really lovely. It has a very off-kilter sensibility to it. You're never quite sure whether what's happening is real, imagined, dreamt, or just a sort of fever dream of a movie. I really, really loved it. I probably shouldn't have.
I've watched this film too, actually. And for the most part, I agree. There is a mystery over who is the airport tannoy man who has an anonymous credit. And so there's still some mystery. I kind of thought it was 1917 in an airport, that you were just following them round while they're bickering for a long time, just without gunfire and the war going on in the background.
I think the most telling thing you can say about it is that the final title card says "For Nora," And I think Meg Ryan very much wanted to make that kind of film, a Nora Ephron film. And she's gone out and she's done a very, very good job of it in a film in a year where it's been pretty good for Nora Ephron movies that aren't Nora Ephron movies.
I'm gonna interject with a companion piece for them. Then I'm going to throw in one of my choices, which is, and it's one of my absolute favourite films of the year. It's Rye Lane, which came out right at the start of the year, and this is directed by Rain Alan Miller. Also, another feature directorial debut, a British feature directorial debut, and another brilliant one. And this has that Richard Linklater thing as well, that we're following the characters of Dom and Yaz as they're basically walking around London. It starts in a gender-neutral toilet, which I thought that's a nice thing to annoy all the people you probably want to annoy. And as a starting point, you can almost imagine the glee in putting that script together. There are a couple of things I really, really, really love about it, but none more so. You talk about being targeted, John. At my age, a film that comes in at 90 minutes or less is like bloody Christmas. Yes. And Rye Lane, the credits started before we got to 80 minutes. Now, I'm old enough to remember going to watch Look Who's Talking 2 in the 1990s, which is one of the worst sequels I'd ever sat through. And Look Who's Talking 2 ran for 81 minutes, including repeating the entire opening credit sequence from Look Who's Talking 1, which went on for about 5 minutes. So you've got about 75 minutes of new material. New inverted commas. I remember feeling cheated by that and thinking, what kind of person would want to film that short? The answer to that now is me. Rye Lane is, again, I don't want to tell you much about it. I just thought it was an absolute joy. And if you kind of mixed up Nora Ephron with Richard Linklater, I think you've sort of got a little bit of the tempo of the film. So that's one of mine. And I think they're an interesting double bill.
Has anybody got Past Lives on their list?
Past Lives, anyone? Do we not put that? Which is a brilliant film, but clearly not. So you're not allowed to talk about it. Does it have nuns in it?
It does not have nuns in it.
That's why it's not on the list.
It was actually my favourite film of the year, and I assumed someone else would talk about it. So it's
unbelievable.
On the list,
so what is on your list, James?
So next on my list, I've got Bottoms. Of course you have. Of course I do. Which is directed by Emma Seligman and co-written by Emma with Rachel Sennett. They worked together on Shiva Baby, which was a very stressful-looking film that I've not seen from 2 years ago. It stars Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri as a couple of high schoolers who set up a girls-only fight club in order to wrestle with cheerleaders, essentially. One of my favorite films of the last 5 years, I think, is Olivia Wilde's Booksmart. And this is a very similar setup, but you almost couldn't have two more different films. It's joyfully spiky. It's quite provocative in the way that it really leans into the fight club element. You've got lots of close-up bits of people just punching each other incredibly hard in the face and walking around school feeling so overpowerful and empowered with big smiles, happy music playing in the background while they've got slits up their nose and broken limbs and that sort of thing. There is a big fight at the end with a rival football team, which is one of the funniest things I've seen all year. And it's just, I'm a sucker for a high school movie, and it's a really unique and sort of special high school movie. And yeah, it's lovely.
Who else has seen Bottoms?
I have seen Bottoms.
Did you like Bottoms as well?
I thought it was okay. I feel like there was a lot more potential to do something a bit more outrageous. It's a film that thinks it's more scandalous than what it is, but I do applaud the effort.
Well, I'm going side by side with James here. I like Bottoms as well.
Of course you like Bottoms, Simon.
Are we adding Bottoms to our growing Fast and Furious script?
Why is it called Bottoms? As somebody that hasn't seen it, is there many bottoms in it?
That's the elephant in the room question, isn't it? Go for it.
I think explaining this, Ryan, would make us put an explicit warning on the podcast.
If you do that, I found this out this year. If you do that, there are certain countries this podcast won't be allowed to be released in. Ryan, how badly do you want to know about Bottoms?
Well, we can edit this out, can't we? Can't you just bleep it?
No. If you're going down, you're going down.
Blimey. Well, that's it. I think you've already got us banned from at least 6 countries, just saying that.
Finland, we should be all right, though, with Maria. And you finished listenership. Maria, have you got something other than Bottoms you can tell us about?
Well, I think this is a good time for me to bang on about what a great year 2023 has been for women. I mean, you already mentioned...
It's really your link to that going from Bottoms?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay. Men have Bottoms as well.
Bottoms, obviously, Emma Seligman. We mentioned Past Lives. Barbie is currently the highest grossing film of the year, and the only, Greta Gerwig is the only woman to have made $1 billion film, which is incredible. But what I'd like to talk about is women talking. Because who doesn't love women talking?
The Oscar-winning women talking.
Exactly, and for good reason. I feel like it kind of got brushed under the carpet when it came out in February in the UK, but it's a work of tremendous empathy. And I remember watching it last year and being completely floored by it, and how compelling a film that is literally just a group of women talking to each other about whether or not to leave or to stay in a community where the men consistently and constantly abuse them and rape them. And I remember you never see these attacks, which I think is a very, very smart choice on Sarah Polley's direction. But it's an incredible, incredible film. And even though it did win the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, I don't think people talk about it enough. So I really want to highlight that and encourage people to go and watch it.
There is a little bit of a trend for this, that you get very acclaimed films at awards time that just don't get any kind of tail to them now. Because I looked at, I don't know if you remember Till from last year as well. I thought Till was extraordinary. There's not been a DVD release of it in the UK. And I just went looking for it. It's just like, there's just an absence of, and I agree with you. I think women talking has virtually disappeared from conversation. But you have resurrected it single-handedly, Maria. Its fortunes have turned, apart from the Oscar. Ryan, you like people talking, don't you, Ryan?
Yeah. Speaking of which, so my second film is Killers of the Flower Moon, which is, I think most people know what this is. This is Martin Scorsese's latest film. Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, who's amazing. It's a fantastic film. I won't go over the plot because it's absolutely massive and there's Wikipedia. But it's a film about evil and greed. I think one of the things that's important to highlight about Scorsese's films is they're deeply moral. People kind of get in a panic about his films sometimes about, dwelling on violence or things, or, that sort of thing. But I think that his films always have a moral core to them. And this one especially. I think considering he's a director in his 80s, I think it's amazing how angry and urgent his filmmaking still is and how experimental it is as well. I mean, this film at the beginning has an awful lot of backstory and context to impart, and it does so casually with kind of little pieces of newsreel footage, shot in Academy and all this kind of thing. And it's ingeniously done, and it's just a brilliant film. I know some people have said, it's too long. It's 3 hours 26 minutes, which is only a little bit longer than Avengers Endgame and shorter than the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I think the complaints about its duration, I think, are a little bit moot, to be honest. I mean, to me, it flew by. I thought it was just a stunning.
Well, I saw it with you, and neither of us went to the toilet, which at our age was quite something. But also, you're talking about the economy almost of the setup. I don't know if you remember Casino, where the Scorsese, I'd be interested to see what Scorsese would do with Casino now, because the first hour of that is really heavy voiceover, isn't it? It's just it's just a lot of telling you things. I really love Casino, but I agree with you. It's just like the opening of Killers of the Flower Moon gets over an absolute ton.
What I would say about Killers of the Flower Moon is I think I'm listening to the audiobook at the moment, and the audiobook is, I think it comes in about 7 or 8 hours. And considering the amount of material that sort of could have been cut, I do feel like Killers of the Flower Moon is a little on the long side. And that's not because I don't like a long film, because one of my favorite Scorsese films is The Irishman, which I think is near enough the same length. But I think The Irishman needs that length to tell sort of the expanse of the story that it's telling. I think Killers of the Flower Moon does drag on a little bit for me. Obviously, it's still
The Irishman is way worse than Killers of the Flower Moon. The Irishman is infinitely worse.
I think we may have to agree to disagree.
The Irishman is based on a book which is a complete pack of lies as well, which is slightly unfortunate. I don't know if Martin Scorsese knew that when he was making The Irishman and didn't mind. But
allegedly, if the author of the book is listening,
there is lots of evidence to suggest that he was not at every major event in the mid-20th century, like Forrest Gump. But anyway,
okay, so we're just libeling potential murderers. Gotcha. But not for the first time in my career. I wish that wasn't true, but actually is true. That notwithstanding, Lauren, save me from being sued.
Yep, changing the subject. So I guess further to Maria's point about it being a really good year for women, I caught up last week with Fair Play, which is the feature debut of Chloe Dumont. and on Netflix. So anyone who has a subscription can watch that. They should watch that now. But yeah, I guess it's kind of going down the lines of the old erotic thriller, which we don't really see much of anymore. And it's Phoebe Dynevor and Alden Ehrenreich, who's very good and should be in more films. And just a really twisty, kind of horrible thriller where you've got a couple who work for the same firm and secretly, because they're not actually allowed to. And she gets a promotion over him, and it kind of wounds his pride, and that kind of opens up this rift between them that turns really nasty and violent. And it's just kind of a real edge of your seat thing.
It is horrible. I do agree. I mean, Maria, you've seen it as well, haven't you?
Yes, and I interviewed Chloe Demont for it, and it was a brilliant chat.
Would you like to tell us some of that?
I could do, I could be persuaded, I guess. No, I think it's a really clever film. One of my favorite bits of what me and Chloe talked about was how emotional the men are. It's usually women are kind of portrayed, and it's seen as a weakness of how emotional we are, and it's used against us. But in this film, quite early on, somebody gets fired and they throw a massive tantrum. And that's kind of a brilliant sort of through line, is that the men tend to be more obnoxious and emotional and keen on throwing tantrums, but it's always used against women. And I love how there's this constant fight, a power dynamic and a fight for the power that extends from work to the home and to the bedroom. We all know that I love a bit of filth. It's no secret at this point.
Well, people who've not heard you on the podcast before, this will be fresh news. But yes, I think it is worth noting that whenever a film that's slightly on the fruitier side crops up, it's either Lauren or Maria who tend to be sticking their hands up for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But again, Lauren and we have exceptional taste. So there we go. But no, I definitely agree with Lauren. It's such a good film. And another one that's kind of gone unnoticed a little bit.
That's the Netflix problem now, though, isn't it? I mean, we're recording this on the day that Netflix has released like 18 trillion lines of data as to who watches what. I think, is it The Night Manager from years ago is the most watched thing on Netflix, and most of the films just seem to, they get 2 weeks of noise and then they're just completely gone.
One more note for anyone who did need convincing on Fair Play, it also has a very nice little chunk of screen time for Eddie Marsan, who is just excellent in everything he's in.
That's fair. I do wonder what the version of that. In the 80s and 90s, that would have been directed by a man. It probably would have been directed by Paul Verhoeven, and it would have been a radically different film.
It would have had nuns as well, probably.
Well, he did a nun film, didn't he? Ryan, was Benedetta his nun film?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there we go. So maybe history should, not all advancements are to the benefit of films. So Fair Play with added nuns is to add to the list. Sister Act 3 is coming, I think. We could do some kind of crossover there. John.
Yes. At this point, I was going to speak about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Part 1.
Well, which had the biggest shock ending of the year. And I literally guffawed when it said Part 2 coming in May 2024.
Which it isn't.
Which it was abundantly obvious. As a film that sounds like it had a horrific production and wasn't exactly very nice for a lot of the people that were working on it, for them with changes were being made right up until the last minute and beyond the last minute of that film being released, that they put that up on the screen is frankly hilarious and frightening. But I'm not going to talk about Across the Spider-Verse, because if nobody else is going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about Past Live, because it's absolutely...
No, you've done... Just on beyond on Across the Spider-Verse, you said beyond the last minute that changes were being made. Was this like kind of Cats level of stuff, where they're issuing the upgrade patch to the cinemas?
Apparently the digital releases have changes and things that were not in the film. People were putting stuff out right up beyond... that they were getting different versions, different cinemas and different things were being seen by different people. And then there were some further changes made, I think, to the digital releases.
Yeah, it was treated as Easter eggs, wasn't it? Like people seeing different versions and going, oh, cool, I saw this slightly different scene. But I guess it's a question as to whether that was the intention or whether that was the narrative to whether it was edited post-release.
That's context again, isn't it? If a film is widely acclaimed, it's an Easter egg. If it's no one called the upgrades to Cats Easter eggs, did they? No, that's just like let's get the wristwatch off Judi Dench. I mean,
Peloton is ready when you are. Bring home the Peloton Bike Plus for the holidays and work out your way. Unleash everything. It's your workout, your rules. As long as you show up, Peloton's instructors will help you show off and keep you coming back for more. For Peloton's December offer, head to onepeloton.com/deals. All access membership separate. Terms apply.
Tired of ads interrupting your favorite show? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free-fitness to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.
That's an Easter egg.
Yeah, I want to talk about Past Lives because
go on then. It is great.
Celine Song, debut film, playwright, writer on Amazon's Wheel of Time. Basically, out of the blue, I guess, creates the most bittersweet, deeply affecting reflection on getting older, the path's not taken, just how amazing New York looks on film, cross-cultural barriers, even in a world that's shrinking, and how you never really escape the formative years of your life. And I mean, wow, what a film. It took me a long time to get around to seeing it. I've seen it in the last week, so if I sound like it's all very fresh and affecting, it is very fresh and affecting for me at the moment. But to produce that kind of drama without ever once being mawkish or sentimental or taking up any of the tropes that those kind of storylines often fall back on. I mean, what a piece of work. Every character in that film, well, there's three main characters, but to make the three main characters in that film both entirely relatable, likable, understandable, and you care deeply about them, all of them, by the time that you finish. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I haven't seen it enough to know if it's a perfect script, but that's quite an achievement, I think, and it should be applauded. And to do all of that and to still create something that is visually arresting and uses its environments as a character and as a special effect, just great filmmaking.
It does the Anatomy of a Fall thing as well. Anatomy of a Fall is a masterpiece of a movie, but it presents the film in multiple languages. And I found in Anatomy of a Fall, I found it in Past Lives as well. That really got under my skin a bit more than I was expecting it to, because a lot of the time we talk about exploring cultures on film, but we kind of ignore the language of it. But hearing actually like the authentic language for the separate parts of the movie, I just thought I think Anatomy of a Fall actually does it superbly, absolutely superbly, really affects the film a lot. I think it affects it in Past Lives as well.
I just want to shout out the framing device of Past Lives, the voices at the start, which set it up as something much, much lighter than it turns out to be. And also pass a comment on how we can take these very personal things and turn them into jokes and treat them lightly. But once you dive into you come back to that moment at the end of the film and you realise just what is on the line while these two people that you've heard at the start are joking about it. It manages in a very simple way to say a lot about how unempathetic people can be in the world in general, in this sort of culture that we have of observing other people through social media and things like that. Yeah, I mean, just what a movie. What a great movie.
Well, I think that neatly brings us on to The Expendables 4.
No one's favourite film of the year.
It's no one's favourite film of the year, because when I was considering this list, I thought about I really should put Anatomy of a Fall on, which I thought was superb. But I've got a loyalty to people like Jason Statham, which has run like in a sticker rock right through my career have been his films. And what a piss poor year for him. That The Expendables 4. Crap. The last Fast and Furious film.
I do have to correct you. It's Expend 4.
No. It's The Expendables 4. It's called The Expendables 4. I love David Fincher's Seven. It is a masterpiece. However, there is an argument that it started all this shit. of putting numbers in titles. Just call it 7. No one calls it the 7. No, unless they're coughing. No. So Fast and Furious 10, I thought that was crap. Although, Ryan, as you've noted, there's a moment in Fast and Furious 10 that deserves bringing up, where Jason Momoa just goes a little bit mad.
Painting the fingernails of a corpse is fantastic. Yeah. It was nearly a DVD outtake, apparently. They didn't know until they were editing it they were actually going to put it in, because it was kind of one of those on-the-spot scenes.
It's the best bit of the film, of a terrible film. And so when Jason Statham lets you down, there's only one other person in those circumstances you can turn to, and that's Gerard Butler. And Gerard Butler did not make his finest film this year, but someone's got to make a stand for the old ways. So going in my list and suck it up is Plane. Because, we are talking about some incredible films here. Films I've absolutely adored. They'll win Oscars. We're talking about the progression. We're talking about the breakthrough of so many incredible filmmaking talent. Then you get to Plane, and which is a title straight away that's been designed for the short attention span generation, of which I'm rapidly becoming one. And my favourite bit of Plane, this is a little bit spoilery, so I will give you a second just to tune out. My favourite bit of Plane is where they run out of plot after about an hour. And so you've got Gerard Butler, who pilots his plane, then he lands his plane, then he shoots a load of people, and then they're like, what can we do now? Let's just get back in the plane and take off again. And I've not guffawed so hard at a moment in a film when they decide. It's like the bit in Con Air where they suddenly start to drag the plane out the sand, as if 7 or 8 people with a load of rope they didn't have before could possibly pull anything of that way. So in terms of pure joy, it was right there at the start of the year, the kind of crap that cinema is rightly fueled by and is hugely entertaining and is Friday night full on. I'm going to go for Plane. Is anyone arguing before I edit you out?
I actually think it's been quite a good year for complete nonsense. I've got a handy little list. We've got Meg and one of again.
I've completely bypassed deliberately Meg to the Trench because I love Ben Wheatley and I love Jason Statham, and I sat through that film and I was nearly weeping.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree in that sign, because when Jason Statham takes a harpoon out of his back and it makes the little shing noise, like he's pulling out a samurai sword, I applauded.
No, the version of Meg 2 that should have been made should have had a 15 or an 18 certificate. And when the sword came out of his back, not only did it make a cute little noise, I wanted blood vessels going. I wanted a gusher.
Well, I also like the sequence where he uses his deviated septum to go beneath the Mariana Trench without a diving suit. I enjoyed that very much. But it was a very good year for nonsense. There was M. Freegan, there was Evil Dead Rise. That was very good. We haven't talked about yet.
Those are not nonsense.
Well, it's a lot of goo.
It's also called Megan. It's not called M. Freegan. Megan's really good, though.
It is.
That's not nonsense.
It's not. It knows it's nonsense, and it's very good nonsense. It's top tier fine wine nonsense. It's fine wine nonsense, Simon. The Pope's Exodus, you already mentioned. Thanksgiving, Eli Roth's new film. No one's seen that, but it's very nice. Have I said Cocaine Bear? I have to say Cocaine Bear again. That was very good. Very silly.
Did you like Plane, Ryan? That's more up your street, isn't it?
It had a man hitting another man with a hammer, so I did like it. It was a really big hammer as well, huge. Like, the ones you get at fun fairs where it sort of rings a bell and it's the top of the thing. It hits a man with one of those. It's brilliant. It's like Donkey Kong or something. I did like it. And I think it's the most incompetent airline in cinema as well, which I think needs to be highlighted.
And you did.
It's interesting to contrast the plane crash in this with Society of the Snow. I know they're two very different films, but I think Society of the Snow shows how terrifying a plane crash can be, and the one in Plane kind of just is a bit more. It almost seems fun.
Someone dies, Ryan. A woman dies in that plane crash.
2 people did. They hit the ceiling, didn't they? What was the FBI guy bounced off the ceiling, and then didn't they? And then it was one of there's like 3 air hosts on the whole plane, and one of them, I think, did she get hit by a shopping trolley or something? I can't remember. It's something really random.
She breaks her neck on the back of a seat when she falls down.
That's
right, because she unbuckles at the wrong time, doesn't she? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
The finest vehicle crash of the year, though, was Dead Reckoning Part 1, wasn't it? When by the end of that, they're lugging chip fat and a grand piano at Tom Cruise. I mean, again, I'm not making that up. Maria, give us your final choice. Rescue this again. Is it as good as Plane, whatever it is?
I'm a bit worried that this is going to get you some downvotes because my final choice is Babylon.
Oh, Babylon's great.
I thought so too, but there is a lot of people who do not think that. A lot of people think it's a 1-star film. I think it's a 5-star film. It's beautiful and it has a lot of filth, especially in the first 30 minutes. So already a winner in my eyes. But also I love how it's simultaneously in love with Hollywood and this old Hollywood specifically, but also very disillusioned by it. And I think that's a very intoxicating mix for a film. And obviously a great cast, Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, Diego Calva. It's perfect.
Perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect.
It's got a frame from Avatar in it.
That's why it's not perfect. Lauren Miles smashes it out the park.
As per usual.
Yeah.
As a fan of the period, I mean, the references of all the stuff like the Roscoe Arbuckle thing and all that kind of stuff that comes very early in it is just, I love it. It's amazing.
And yet, in a statement of intent, not only do those references come early, they're preceded by an elephant shitting all over people.
Yeah.
Again, that's why it's, it might be my film of the year. But it also kind of came directly after we had a lot of films that were very much these love letters to cinema, like The Fabelmans and Empire of Light and Belfast to some extent. And they were very, romantic about the big screen. And the ending of Babylon is very similar to that. But yeah, there's an elephant shitting violently on people. So,
that would have been a very different cut of The Fabelmans, wouldn't it?
Arguably better.
Oh, you really are going for it. The ending of The Fabelmans is amazing. I love the ending of that.
But it would be improved by an elephant shitting, wouldn't it?
What film wouldn't?
Exactly. That's my whole point.
Okay. Oh, God. I say this with a heavy heart because he's just grinning at me. He's grinning at me. James, what one more on your list that doesn't involve the Pope?
I have to change my answer then. No, so you said at the start that I was bringing the highbrow element to this podcast, and I wish I'd known that before I talked about the Willy Wonka prequel and the Bottom film. But I'm actually going to put our first documentary into the vault called Hello Bookstore.
Yes.
It's a lovely documentary about a man called Matthew Tannenbaum, who's an old hippie that lives in Lenox, Massachusetts. He bought a bookshop called The Bookstore in 1976 when he was 29 years old, 10 days before his 30th birthday. And I was reading another review of it just before we started recording, and the reviewer pointed out that it's the only documentary they've seen that ends with a reading list. And I think that really sums up sort of how lovely and warm and just gentle the documentary is. It's directed by Adam Zach, and in a way it's quite a familiar story of, it's a lovely little independent business on the rocks. COVID happens, which doesn't do it any favors. It's running out of money. Will it be able to survive? But most of the film is just spent listening to Matthew Tannenbaum, this lovely, lovely old man, telling stories about books and booksellers. And quite often he's reading passages from books. It's not always clear when you hear his voice start whether he's regaling someone of a story about his life or the story of one of the books they've picked up, or if he's just reading a passage from a book. And he clearly just loves reading and he loves people. His bookshop has a little wine bar in it, and he just sits and drinks with the regulars for hours and hours and hours. It's a lovely, lovely film. And there's so many moments where someone walks into the bookstore, they're just browsing, looking for recommendations. He sort of looks them up and down, and then with a nice little twinkle in his eye, he says, "I know just the book for you." And it warmed my heart. And it's very similar to, in sort of a tonal way, to another documentary from last year, which I know you liked, Simon, A Bunch of Amateurs, which is about a Bradford cinema club. But no, it's a lovely, lovely, heartwarming documentary. And I don't think enough people saw it. It appeared in, I think, June this year. Went to a couple of cinemas and then sort of disappeared into on demand. If you can track it down, just watch it and be overjoyed.
That's a lovely recommendation. Sadly, when you said reading list, my head just went to the start of Saltburn, where he sat there and then said that he's read the entire reading list. And Saltburn is just, well, a film we're not going to discuss much, but I'd just like to point out I take showers, not baths. Just putting that out there. John?
No, you know.
Right. My final choice is, I cannot justify this choice.
I love it already.
No, there's no scale on which I can justify this as the best film of the year, but in terms of something that I 100% enjoyed, I want to talk about Shin Kamen Rider, which was a Japanese film created by Hideki Anno, who is most famous for creating Evangelion, the impenetrable series of anime, which finished finally after 20 odd years, a couple of years ago, with the third Evangelion film, which I finally got to see this year as well. So I want to talk about his weirdness a little bit. Shin Kamen Rider is the third of his kind of Shin series, New Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, which he wrote but didn't direct because he stopped being involved with that film in order that he could move on to Shin Kamen Rider, which is based on a tokusatsu series from Japan, which is kind of like a kids action series. Think of like the A-Team or whatever. It's kind of like that kind of status in Japanese culture from the 70s. And basically uses these things like Godzilla and Ultraman, Kamen Rider as a vessel to talk about the things that Hideki Anno likes to talk about, which is what is the nature of being, what is the soul, how do we find happiness, the rise of fascism, just these overarching themes that he manages to work into everything that he does, couched in silly anime nonsense, which I love. Live action film with egregious use of computer graphics and some great, not great special effects. It knows exactly what it is. It does very, very weird things with the camera. It has its own unmistakable personality about it, which Shin Godzilla did. Shin Ultraman, which comes in the middle of the three, obviously has the same themes underpinning it, but is nowhere near as interesting to watch as either of those films, and which says a lot for the slightly unhinged brilliance of Anno, and I'm 100% here for it. And I'm looking forward to seeing whatever his mind comes up with next. Yeah, can't justify it. It's nonsense.
Oh, you just have. We'll let you have that. I don't think any of the rest of us have seen it. You've hammered us into submission. Lauren.
So yeah, my last one, I wanted to dig something out from the beginning of the year because I think...
Was it Plane?
No.
Okay.
I think that they sometimes get a bit unfairly forgotten amongst all the recent stuff. So I picked Polite Society, which I love. And I thought was fantastic. And yeah, just really fun stuff. So it's another debut writer-director, Nida Manzoor. And yeah, it's an action movie. It's a film about sisters. It's a film about family and overcoming other people's expectations of what you should do with your life. And so yeah, it's Priya Kansara stars in it as Ria. She's an aspiring stunt woman. That's where the action comes in. Ritu Arya is her older sister Lena, who's kind of like a dropout failing artist type. And yeah, one of the things I really loved initially is it gets that sisterly bond right. And I've got personal experience where that's concerned, where you love them infinitely, but you also want to throttle them at the same time. And it's a film that gets that.
I've seen some of the action in Polite Society, and I agree, the action is amazing. Are you just saying you want to kick the living shit out of your sister?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably worth putting that on record. Already this podcast is attracting more legal attention than I'd like. So
she was very specific, Simon.
She was. Fair point. So in terms of action, I mean, Maria, you've suggested Sisu, and then we've got Polite Society as well. Is that as good as the action cinema got this year?
I think it's up there. I also tremendously enjoyed Polite Society, and like Lauren said, it really gets that sisterly bond quite correct. But yeah, I think we also have something like John Wick Chapter 4, which I thought, even though it's very much not my kind of film, the action set pieces were great. And I can't think of any, well, no, actually, I can think of a terrible, terrible action film, which we've already mentioned, which is Fast 10. But overall, I think action cinema in 2023 has been rather good.
I think it's been a year for silly violence, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There have been films that maybe take themselves a bit too seriously. Like I did think that Chapter 4 of John Wick, it did drag on a bit and it was a bit self-serious. And Polite Society is more like, this wall is clearly made of paper, let's chuck someone through it. And that's just fabulous.
Also, I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 which was a beautiful end to James Gunn's trilogy and the best Marvel film we've had in probably since Endgame, because they've really struggled with their films. But it has one particularly good action set piece, which is just in a hallway. And again, something that's a little bit silly, but also just kicks ass, which is all we could ever ask for in any action set piece.
I will throw in on the action side, out of Birmingham patriotism as much as anything else, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, because I thought that really put in a shift. And I rewatched that last weekend. And one of the key reasons I love it is there aren't that many films shot in Birmingham where I live. Steven Spielberg came here once to make Ready Player One when he was looking for a future dystopia shithole film in, and it's a genuine true story. He came to Birmingham. He wanted a pile of crap that hadn't been seen on screen before, and so he picked a particular area of the city. With Dead Reckoning Part 1, we were all really excited Tom Cruise was coming to town. It turned out they redressed Birmingham New Street Station as Abu Dhabi Airport, and we nicked Tom Cruise's car as well while he was in. So,
as you do.
It wasn't me, Governor.
Alleyways and corridors. The Venice scenes of
it's incredible. Dead Reckoning. They put in a shift, right? It's
Venice scenes of Dead Reckoning, fantastic. Pom Clementi off again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
great. Shout out to Rita Aria as well. Managed to get into Polite Society and Barbie movie this year. I mean, she is absolutely killing it.
I mean, who wasn't in Barbie or
I wasn't. Gerard Butler wasn't. I looked.
And you're a bit salty about both, clearly.
Ryan.
Hello.
You tell us your third choice.
I was kind of a bit torn. But, the obvious one was Oppenheimer initially, but then I found out that Talk to Me, even though it sort of was a festival film last year, was only released this year in the UK. So I'm going for Talk to Me, which is a great, lean, 90-ish minute horror, brilliantly directed by Danny and Michael Philippou. It's their debut, even though they've been making YouTube videos since they were kids. And they're the sort of people that can't resist hitting each other with chairs. They did a lot of backyard wrestling videos. So to have them go from that to what is actually a really interesting, quite mature, very off-kilter horror film, it's quite fascinating. It makes my list because I was so surprised by it. I wasn't expecting it to be this interesting to look at, this disturbing, this freaky. A brilliant lead performance from Sophie Wilde. I think she's going to be a big star off the back of this. It's atmospheric. It actually has teenagers that talk and feel like teenagers, characters that you care about, which you don't always get in horror films. Yeah, like I say, it's one of my surprises of the year.
Ryan, did you watch the first hour of Haunting in Venice?
I did, yes.
Which, by most of my the horror experts I know, are declaring it not a great year for horror. But the two things that have come through are Talk to Me, as you've just said, and the first hour of Haunting in Venice. Are you roughly in those camps?
I'd like to see Haunting in Venice directed by Danny and Michael Philippou, to be honest, because I think they're better directors of horror than Kenneth Branagh is. I think that the problem I had with Haunting in Venice was the editing and the use of lenses. It's a good film. It's a good murder mystery. I enjoyed it. I like all of them. But yeah, if you look at it as a piece of horror, that first hour is not as good a piece of genre filmmaking, I would argue, as Talk to Me. If you look at it shot for shot, but that's just my opinion.
And you loved Oppenheimer as well.
I did like Oppenheimer a lot. Yeah, a brilliant film. But I think the interesting thing is, we were kind of expecting. We'd have been surprised if Oppenheimer was a load of pants coming from Nolan. And like I said, that's the interesting contrast, is because, Nolan is this very urbane, very crisp intellectual filmmaker. And then you have the Philippou brothers, I think they're brothers anyway, punching each other at press conferences and doing all these strange pranks and everything. And it just goes to show that great filmmakers come in all forms, all classes, and from all places. They don't necessarily have to dress like bankers to be brilliant filmmakers.
Do you think their press conferences are Ridley Scott standard?
There's more violence. I think Ridley Scott's more verbal violence, isn't he?
Don't. You'll get James started on Napoleon.
Oh, you will get me started on Napoleon. I was actually going to mention it when we were talking about action sequences, because I do think it's a different sort of action almost, but the battle scenes in Napoleon, I can see Simon has ducked out of the frame in protest, but Napoleon is great, and I won't hear anyone else say, I haven't heard anyone else say it's good, actually. I seem to be its biggest fan. Everyone I speak to says it's 2 or 3 stars. I think it's 5 stars. A horse gets shot with a cannon. And again, Napoleon makes weird little horse noises when he wants to have sex. And I don't know what more you could want from a film. But
personally, a film where someone doesn't make weird little horse noises when they want to have sex, that would be...
I wasn't expecting to come away so disturbed, but yeah, that haunts me.
Yeah, well, that's just your opinion, and they're wrong. But I do agree with you, Ryan. I'd love Talk to Me. I do think it's the best horror film of the year by a long way. I spoke to the Philippi brothers for the website, and they didn't punch each other while I was there, but they were great fun. And I think we're getting to a strange point where films are almost afraid to set themselves in the modern day because no one can figure out how to do phones properly on screen. But then between Talk to Me and another film we haven't talked about, Dumb Money, which came out earlier this year, I think we're just about starting to see filmmakers sort of trying to approach sort of modern day stories and make almost like modern day period pieces that really embrace the side.
That's always been so, though, hasn't it? I mean, you go back to David Fincher's Panic Room, which is a film that was almost undone by the invention of the mobile phone, to the point where they had to kind of write that in a little bit to get round to it. They've always kind of battled technology a little bit.
Yeah, I think
horror was always about people. There always find an excuse for people to be out of signal somewhere.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
I know. The Duffer Brothers, when they're making Stranger Things, they always said for the first season, it's great in the 80s because no mobile phones and radio signals on walkie-talkies were terrible. So whenever you like, you can just say, you can't get through, and then that solves the plot for you. So it is hard, but I think it does feel like this year we might just about be getting a few people making the effort and doing it really well.
There's a film, is it 20th Century Women that was deliberately set in 1979 or something like that, just because they wanted to get, I mean, I might have got the date right. It's a tremendous film that no one talks about. Annette Bening's in it. And it was just that. They're setting it in a time so that they can sidestep technological problems. So there's always ways around. So I'm going for a 70s set film, ironically enough, which is for my last choice, which is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is a film that really, I think, is the worst marketed film of the year. Because I say this as someone absolutely not in the target audience of that film. I'm neither a teenage girl nor was I reading Judy Blume books like 40, 50 years ago. I am, however, a huge fan of its director, Kelly Freeman Craig, who did a film in 2016 called The Edge of 17, which I thought was a tremendous John Hughes kind of influenced teen movie that actually had a bit of bite to it. I'm also a huge fan of Rachel McAdams, who I think is one of the finest actors of her generation as a comedy performer as well. So what they got with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and I'll go plot light on it. It's just the way that they kind of angled it. Was they made it with a rating so that teenage girls could go to it. And I think it's a PG rated family movie, which is really, really, really rare. A live action one anyway. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine. So they kind of got caught in, who do you aim it at? The people who are reading a Judy Blume book in in the 70s or a teenage girl now? And they promoted this film that I would have thought they'd go for the latter group, really, with like a really 70s font and a really 70s marketing campaign. And it just, I mean, the film just came and went. There was a lot of build up to it. There's a lot of noise, but I think it cost 30 million to make, took 20 million at the box office. Nobody seems to talk about it at all. And it's a real delight. I went into it knowing nothing about the book, knowing nothing about the background really, and was completely taken away by it. It's one of the few live action films this year as well that I can sit with my kids and watch, and they will ask questions about it that are actual conversations not related to why is Russell Crowe on a motorbike and exercising things for the Pope or anything like that. And I mean, lots of us have talked on this about the films that we think people have missed out on this year, because we could have led with Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I don't think there's anyone on this chat who doesn't love films like that, who hasn't. I mean, in terms of blockbuster cinema this year, have a look at the Take That musical as well, Greatest Day. What really underrated and lost and then dumped on Amazon Prime like 4-6 weeks later because it had really good weather in the UK the weekend it was opening. There are films falling through the cracks. And so I wanted to pick one while subtly getting another one in there. And that's it for me. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which even on DVD and stuff is already being discounted. I'm amazed it's got to DVD, so that's good.
You can go and see it on Amazon Prime Video if you have a subscription.
Yeah, and I think all of us feel passionately about these are the films and the filmmakers who deserve the light on them. You know, Ryan, you were talking about Gareth Edwards there and how the creator, as much as it was backed by a Disney budget, and the trailer was big, and so it didn't really feel like it had the oomph behind it. And once it had its opening weekend, the discourse just kind of disappeared, and I just don't think it should. Hopefully, when it gets to Disney Plus, that will change it. But we're kind of clinging to that quite a lot with some of the films we're talking about here, apart from the papal one. Is there, before we round this off and say nice things to the people who've suffered us this far, are there any other films anyone wants to name check that haven't been name checked that we should? Otherwise, we're going to get shot.
I don't think anyone's mentioned the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Oh, that was good fun.
It was great fun. I think, again, like you were saying, it's in terms of, I think it is actually a 12A, but in terms of sort of a PG family adventure movie, I think it's hard to get much better. I think it's been a really good year for comedy in general, actually, because Dungeons and Dragons was directed by, I can't remember the names, but they directed
the Game Night Team.
Game Night Team. Brilliant film. Theatre Camp as well is another sort of comedy that sort of came and went under the radar. I think that is on some streaming service now, but that's fantastic.
It's Disney Plus.
And because no one else will mention it, because everyone hates Wes Anderson for some reason, I loved Asteroid City. I thought Asteroid City was just my cup of tea. It's very Wes Anderson-y. There's a little alien who I would like to be my friend very much. And
does the alien make strange noises when people have sex?
The alien makes no noises, actually. He's a completely silent alien, but
that's quite cynical. Okay.
He's stop motion. I'll mention Chicken Run 2 briefly, and then get back to Asteroid City. But it looks beautiful. It's I think it's a really special film. I think it's Wes Anderson's best film since. I'm going to say Moonrise Kingdom. I absolutely loved it.
Speaking of aliens, I would just like to drop in Brian Duffield's No One Will Save You. That's another one. It got dropped on Disney Plus, wasn't even on the front page, totally buried and forgotten. But it's a home invasion film with an alien, and it's a real classic X-Files alien design. And yeah, just on a small budget, small film, not much dialogue, if really any at all. But just a really good kind of capsule film that's just a brilliant genre film as well.
You're a fan of that, weren't you, Ryan?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Kate Diva is great in it, and yeah, like Lauren said, virtually no dialogue at all. So it's almost like a return to Duel or something like that. You know, Steven Spielberg's film in its sort of economy. Yeah, it's really thought provoking as well. At the end, I won't spoil it, but it's really interesting genre film.
I'm going to throw in May December because that's now out.
Yeah, it's terrific.
That was a very sobering, piercing script and a brilliant watch with no weak links in its cast.
Very, very upbeat films you're picking, Marine.
Extremely unnerving little film.
It really was. And the one other thing I'm going to throw in is not the film itself, but the performance in it. I wasn't a mad fan of M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, but I think the emergence of Dave Bautista as a leading man has been quite extraordinary. That I remember, what was the Bond film, Ryan, where he was just in there just to lump shit out of people? Was it Spectre?
Spectre, yeah.
Yeah. And so he's gone in, less than 10 years from being cast as, the wrestler turned actor, cast as someone to go in and smack 7 shades out of someone and be a threatening, imposing presence, to a really nuanced and ambiguous performance. And I think I was listening to, it might have been on Kermode and Mayo show, someone wrote in and just said, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that of the wrestlers turned actors, it wouldn't be Dwayne Johnson we'd be talking about as the real charisma and the real acting lead. And that's no slight on him, but it's Dave Bautista. He has turned into a really, really unpredictable actor. So cast him in more things, I think, particularly if you're going to have so many shades of grey to the character. I just thought he was exceptional in that. Film's not much comp.
Pair of glasses really well.
I wear a pair of glasses really well too. This has been, this has obviously, as everyone who will leave us hugely positive reviews will back me up, has been a delight. I thank you all for your time. And if you'd like to throw in like a Christmas movie or something at the end, feel free. I'm going for Kenneth Branagh's In the Bleak Midwinter. If you've not seen that's my Christmas movie of choice at the moment. I've got the look. Oh, they're all looking at me like they're Home Alone people. You're not Home Alone people, are you?
Prometheus.
Every day.
Prometheus.
Yeah, it's a Christmas film. Idris Elba's shown dressing a Christmas tree on a spaceship in that film.
Okay.
So technically a Christmas film.
Any advance on Prometheus?
Black Christmas, both
of
versions.
Course. What a daft question. I knew you were going there. It just leaves me to say then a big thank you to a delightful bunch of people, and to Maria, to John, to James, to Lauren and Ryan. And on behalf of everyone at Film Stories, thank you for supporting, reading, listening, doing all the things you do. We wish you a lovely Christmas and a very movie nerdy New Year, hopefully with more popes in, hopefully with more exorcisms, and hopefully with Gerard Butler landing more planes. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Do you want to do a unified bye that's a bit better than that? Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the end of our Review of the Year episode of Film Stories. Thank you so much for tolerating it. It's not the last episode of Film Stories of the year. We have audio coming your way from our very special Kenneth Branagh event, so that's going to be happening. Hopefully get that just before Christmas. But for now, I'm going to leave you in peace. We've got more films to watch and more stuff to prepare. So if I've not bored you completely, if we've not bored you completely, you can find more from Film Stories on Twitter, if it's called that at the minute. That's at Film Stories. We're at facebook.com/Film Stories online, youtube.com/Film Stories. Our website is filmstories.co.uk. That is updated regularly every weekday with movie news, reviews, features, games, TV, abundance of things that we're putting on there at the moment. You can subscribe to our magazine. You can buy copies of our print magazine if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk as well. As always, if you like this podcast, please feel free to leave a review, ideally a hugely positive review, and subscribe at your podcast home of choice. That stuff really helps too. You get the podcast early and ad-free if you go to patreon.com/SimonBrew. You find out the gossip of what we're up to behind the scenes. But that is it now. That really is it. I am winding this episode up. I'm going to get an enormous cup of coffee, which I intend to enjoy, and I'm going to bathe in some more Gerard Butler films. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. I'll be back soon with another bunch of Film Stories. Bye-bye.
Tired of ads interrupting your favorite show? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free-fitness to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.